well-laid plan had just fallen apart. The woman told her not to worry. Everything would turn out for the best. Melissa was so taken by the surety that this woman conveyed. She had never thought about things in that way. It changed her mind. It changed her life. I'm not sure whether Mormonism engenders doubt and Judaism inspires hope, but either way, Melissa was set upon a new way of thinking and a different way to live her life. For those who didn't, for those who weren't there at her service, which was very interesting, she has become an Orthodox Jewish woman, married to, of course, an Orthodox Jewish man, and they have now 7 children. And she was really more or less on this path all her life. She just kind of didn't know it. But something really struck her on that day, and she followed that. In a closer look at Mormonism, Moroni, who was the head guy, said, "Doubt not, but be believing." Since her youth, Melissa had doubts about believing in Mormonism as a religion for herself. Surety, on the other hand, is a liability contract, but can also mean one who becomes responsible for another. Perhaps that was the impetus for the Orthodox woman assuring Melissa of a better future. I'm not sure Melissa actually said surety, but that was how I remembered it. Either way, the woman sounded very sure that the outcome would be for the best. In a world of good, better, and best, even better sounds better than despair. As it turned out, her life, by her own estimation, turned out much better. I began to think about when I first came up with the idea that things will get better. I come from a family of worriers, and somehow I didn't seem to get that gene. That alone may be responsible for my willingness to let go and see what happens. When I was young, I remember reading and seeing the movie Gone with the Wind, and always remembered Scarlett O'Hara saying, "I'll think about that tomorrow." In essence, sleep on it, and it probably won't seem as dire tomorrow. I took that as advice and live with it daily. I also happen to believe that the brain is busy solving problems even while we are sleeping. At least, I believe it to be true for me. Now, right now, I have something on my screen, but that doesn't affect you, right? You can see me properly?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to touch it because I'm afraid to touch this computer completely. We're not going there. It occurred to me that 12-step organizations like Alcoholics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, etc., advocate that members give it up to God. It means we are willing to not dwell on the past, but focus on the future. That sounds good. However, willing to see our lives through the grace given to us by God through his son, Jesus Christ, for me is a definite non-starter. I once joined Overeaters Anonymous, and that approach sent me out the door. I've known drug addicts and alcoholics who have had the same experience. How is that approach better than just a belief that there might be an unknown, unnamed force? These organizations might do better to be more inclusive of other belief systems and just leave it up to the individuals to fill in the blanks. This experience may have prepared me for my introduction to Unitarian Universalism, at least the way our fellowship presents it, leaving it to each person to find their own truth. When I say that I believe in a higher power, I can tell you for certain how I came to that belief. I've taken to putting my order out there. Somewhere out there, I put my order out there and seen what comes of it. Somehow, much of what I order comes my way. The first time I remember receiving the requested order was when I was still in my 20s. I had bought an antique chandelier for my dining room in South Lee, Massachusetts. It was missing 6 glass shades. I thought, since I was an antique dealer myself, I would have no trouble finding them at an auction or antique shop. I was mistaken. I was working way too hard finding them. One day, when I was disposing of garbage at the dump, I spotted a box on the ground, and unbelievably, the box contained 5 matching shades that were perfect for the lamp. Now I only needed one. At the time, I had an apartment in New York City, and when I went to visit my apartment in the city for a while, I discovered that I had the 6th matching shade hanging in my very own bathroom. Don't know what I would call this gift, but it is still very difficult to explain how it could have happened. I asked my husband, Tom, he's here, what he thought about a higher power. He said he believed there was a higher power. He called it him, but that it had nothing to do with any personal success he has had. He attributes that to luck. After reading Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, the right set of circumstances, when and where you were born and how you were raised, has a lot more to do with success. Technology gurus like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates were both born between 1952 and 1958. Both were born in 1955. Their timing was perfect for the sweet spot, the Silicon Valley boom. But why them and not hundreds of, if not thousands of contenders born during the same period of time? No say. The same could be said about success of the Beatles. They became magical because they wrote the right words and music and sang it perfectly at the right place at the right time. Is it just timing, or is something else at work? When I spoke to my daughter Melanie about the topic of this talk, she surprisingly didn't roll her eyes. When she hears me say things like, thank God, or my mother's stock expression, God willing, she usually does. She usually really does. She has her own way of seeing power, however, in something she cannot control. She looks for her son's first name, Philip, on movie and TV credits. Somehow, if she sees the name Philip, she feels satisfied that it is a sign that her son will do well and be fine. Tom Shutkin, a past member of our fellowship, was visiting, and I asked him what he thought of higher power. He said he wasn't sure about a higher power, but that he could be. He said he believed in a higher order. He didn't explain it completely, but he thought that things work out because of it. It put me in mind of the Martin Luther King Jr. quote, "The arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice." Since I first started putting requests out into the cosmos, the ether, the universe, I can recount hundreds of incidents where my wishes were seemingly heard and answered. I don't know what to call that kind of energy. What part of this equation is due to my own energy field, and what part is due to some unknown source? When I say higher power, I am not referring to a godlike figure, but situations that occur that not only amaze me, but other people who have witnessed the process. If you ask any of my workmen, or even my husband, Tom, they will shake their heads and say, oh yeah, happens all the time. Recently, one of my ducks was killed. That was my big boy. He was the white one. We think it was a fox, but we're really not sure. It took me quite a time to locate a mature companion for my remaining duck, Pee-wee. After several weeks, I located a farm in New Jersey who had a mature female duck. We rode out to Jersey. It took us 3 hours. We got so lost. Picked up the duck, and I don't know how it happened, but that duck escaped after one day, and we were left without a second duck again. I instantly thought it must be for the best. My daughter called to say that a friend of a friend of a friend had a female duck that needed a new home. So there you go. In one day, the woman and her son brought the new rescue duck, Henny, and now the two ducks are fast friends. Coincidence? I don't know. The most amazing part of the story is that the escaped duck got picked up on the Lehigh River. It took around 8 men to coax it in, but they got it for a 4-H team who was looking for a duck to replace her runaway duck. You tell me. So, when I decided it was time to leave New York City, I told my friends, at my age, it looks like this, my dream house, I'll never have my dream house. Well, guess what? I now live in my dream house. Who gets credit for that? I'd like to add this little story because it really was quite amazing. I had had breast cancer and I was seeing a lot of doctors. I was, I had gone through all chemo and, radiation therapy and 5 years of, medication. But anyway, during this period of time when I was just recovering, I went to a doctor and he told me that he knew cancer when he saw it and I had esophageal cancer. Well, Tom and I were like, it came out of nowhere. We just couldn't believe it, what was going, how this could have possibly happened. It was so frightening that I went for, a second opinion to another doctor that I knew. And he says, I don't really know what it is, because he saw the x-rays or whatever they were taking at the time. He says, but I would go to Sloan Kettering. So I went to Sloan Kettering and they also said, we don't know what it is, but we're willing to go in. And unfortunately, if you go in and they see something, you have to sign off a waiver that says whatever they see, they have the right to, if you give them the right, they have the right to take it out. And they explained to me that if they did have to cut, they would have to then cut part of the esophagus and part of the stomach and then put it back together. They may have to go through the throat. And if they did that, I might have to have a tracheotomy, and then I may have to speak, and I may lose my voice, and I'd have to speak with one of those things. And I thought, oh my God, this is like a nightmare. So I signed it because I thought, well, I whatever it is, I was young enough and I still wanted to live. So the day of the operation, we had to be at the hospital like 5 o'clock in the morning or something like that. There was this enormous snowstorm. This was in New York City. And I called the hospital. I says, there is no way we're getting out of Brooklyn. There are no buses. There are no cars. There's no nothing. The truck, the cleaners have not come to clear the paths or anything. It's no way I can get in. So we set up another time. So on the day of the next operation date, I went to the hospital. I was taken into the operating room. They gave me the anesthesia. And of course, now I'm up for this whole thing. So I was asleep, but Tom got the two doctors within around 10 minutes after going into the operating room, came out and said, and he was scared to death because he said, oh my God, what should you die on the table? And they were smiling. And he said, whatever it was disappeared. It just wasn't there. So they must have gone in with the camera laparoscopically or however they did. It was gone, and it's been gone, and I've never had the problem again. No one's ever said that again. So, you just wonder, like, what could have created that? Well, I was very thankful for that wonderful snowstorm, because without that snowstorm, they would have been in, and I don't know what would have been. So it was snowstorm. So I'll give credit to the snowstorm, but I don't know who created the storm. So to get back to Melissa Hayes Kolakowski, was her visible despair a call for help After all, how many people allow themselves to be vulnerable enough to cry on a New York City subway? Was it serendipity that placed that Orthodox woman next to her? All I can say is that it is comforting to know that when someone verbalizes or exhibits a need, help may be on the way. So I never got a chance to interview Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, or the Beatles. But I wonder if they thought there was some unexplained element of their unfathomable success. Rocky Graziano, the 28-year-old world middleweight champion of 1947, had some thoughts about his success. He wrote a memoir called Somebody Up There Likes Me. And notice, the somebody is unnamed. He was definitely convinced that he didn't get there all on his own. So, and I conclude, why are we as Unitarians lighting candles of joy and concern if we don't in some way believe that our wishes are being received and maybe even being answered? So I just wanted to have you think about something that may or may not have happened to you that you could share with us, because telling stories is what I like to do. If anybody has anything to add to this, because if not, I'll tell you a million other things that have happened, but I'd love to hear your stories. So there you go.
Well, I have a story of a snowstorm. So in 2003, I went to the General Assembly in Boston, and I was never really clear why it was that I had spent my life at the River Reporter. Singer, songwriter, artist, woman, what was I doing? At any rate, but I've had a lot of lovely, good help. Thank you, Jill, for being general manager and advertising, production person. And at any rate, so 2003, I go to the General Assembly, and I go to a workshop called So You Really Want to Be a Unitarian Universalist Minister? And what I heard there was, under no uncertain circumstances was I going to be able to be a Unitarian Universalist minister if I wasn't willing to move. And so it was a very, very, very disheartening, because I didn't really want to move. I just wanted to do my newspaper work through a different lens. And so I went to Star King School for the Ministry's open house, and told my story. And after, at least in my mind's eye, the president of the seminary flew across the room, grabbed her brochure for a master's degree in social leadership or something. I don't have that quite right. At any rate, I came home and I put it on my shelf. I really did want to be ordained. I didn't want a master's of social change. That's what it was, a mask degree. But it was 2 years, at any rate, instead of 3. I just put that thing on my shelf. And Stephen and I started a tradition of going and visiting his daughter and her family in Florida. And so we would go down once a quarter. We would leave on a Wednesday night and we would come back on Sunday. Well, in 2006, it was February, and we went to Florida, and a snowstorm came to Newark Airport, and we could not get back. And, it was delayed, and there was just so many things. And, it seemed like this was when the paper production was a Tuesday. And we finally got back. And I jumped in the car. I mean, it was one thing after another. I was thinking, I kept on looking at my watch. Okay, I'm going to get there at 4. Okay. And then anyway, it was 6 or something, but that was at the time when we were really, it was always much later than that. At any rate, I drove into town, and when I got there, the lights were off and their pages were all done. And there was a note saying, hey, we're back in the morning and we can change anything you want. So I just sat down and I cried. And I went back home and I picked up that brochure off of the shelf, and out fell that mask card. And I saw, and I looked online, and it was the end of February, and I think it was February 28th or something. Anyway, the deadline was March 1st. And so when Stephen came home that next day, I said, well, the deadline is March 1st. And it was that day. He said, well, you call them up, Lori. You call them now. It's 7 o'clock, but it's only 4 o'clock in California. So I called them up. And lo and behold, the deadline was March 15th. I applied, and within weeks, I was getting ready to go to seminary.
It's those snowstorms. It's those snowstorms. That's great.
And then, I mean, I don't want to take a lot of time, but then there was another place where I was really stopped, and I was assaulted in the process. And there was another, another incident that kind of got me to Port Townsend and through my internship. And there was a snowstorm then when I needed to go back to the committee. So at any rate, I don't know what that was, but it was something. And without being snowed into Florida, of all places, I could not have actually, I don't think, I mean, maybe something else would have happened, but that was what got me to seminary.
There's somebody coming up. Because you can't see us, right?
No, I see you now, Stephen. I do see you now.
All right, yeah. I'll be brief. I just about a concept of a higher power. Just something that George Carlin said. We recorded later in life. He said that he was raised Catholic, later identified as an atheist, but then kind of softened up after when as he got older. He once described his concept of God as the big electron. It doesn't reward, it doesn't judge, it just is. And so are we, at least for a little while.
Very good, thank you.
Do I have to look there?
You get people who want to see you. Yeah.
Do I have to come up to share? I'm new at this.
Yeah, that way we can see you and they can hear you better.
And they can see you as well. I don't know. I don't know if it's a higher power, one entity. I don't know if it's a consciousness that's all the dead souls that have been born and died. I just feel like there's an energy in the universe that I feel like when we die, when we pass away, that spark, that literal energy has to go somewhere. And I don't know if anyone's ever felt the hair stand up on their skin because something happens that's so uncanny, or they see something that takes your breath away rather than in a good moment. Wow, kind of. I can't explain through evolution, or maybe evolution is the higher power, the energy. I can't explain why a tiny little seed inside the earth or a woman's body can make another human being grow. I can't understand, and so it has to take my breath away. I can't understand the magic of the situation that you just described. Of they see something, they don't know what it is. They think they're telling you esophageal cancer, which is a horrible thing to say if you have no testing results. And time goes on and it's gone. So for me, there has to be something. There's got to be something that answers our prayers. That I've often felt that, like, I think it's Buddhism, I'm not even sure anymore, that there's beauty even in a garbage dump. That there's something magical, for a better word, that exists. You only need to look for it. And that, to me, is more a greater power than going to a church or a temple. Like, you don't have to be inside a church or a temple or whatever other areas to see the greatness that's beyond us. And to discuss what you had said before, how did Steve Jobs and the other one create the computers and stuff? If they hadn't, somebody else would. There's a saying that when it's time to be, it will be. And if somebody else might have been right on the verge of it and they did it first. But there's also, if you've ever written, if you're a writer or a painter or a sculptress or a sculptor, you know that feeling when there is no time. You may start at 4 o'clock in the morning and not finish until 12 o'clock or 1 in the afternoon, and you look up and where did that time go? Because you're not there. So for me, that's coming from someplace, and it's not necessarily, it's not me. It's not me. So I know there's something, whether it's a greater power or spirituality that we're getting from other people. I don't know, but it's definitely there.
Thank you so much for that. I like the fact that you weren't calling it a higher power, but a greater power. I kind of like that. Maybe I'll change my thinking.
No, we don't have to change anything. Or a cumulative, what do I call it? Cumulative consciousness.
Enjoy this beautiful day. Sharon, nobody else is coming up.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
It's kind of, I always question, it's like, well, first of all, I like the fact that you, I don't know who the last person was who came, what is the name of the last person who came up?
Sharon.
Huh?
Sharon.
Her name is Sharon also.
Oh, your name is Sharon too. Oh, how, well, tell me how that's, that's really good. Anyway, Sharon, I like, it's not, I just renovate buildings but I consider it my art form because I'm not a fine artist. But artists, regardless of how they create, when there is nothing and they make something, well, that is some sort of crazy thing, unexplainable. There's nothing there and then something is created. Well, that alone is amazing. And when I was in theater, or even when I was singing, they always said, I don't know where any of it comes from, because they always, really great actors always say, I'm just the vehicle. I'm the instrument. It just comes through me. I'm not really, something is helping it come through me. So a lot of people have this feeling, especially in the arts, that there is maybe a greater power, something that's not all them, something else. So thank you so much for that. And so what I wanted to close with, and I want to thank you all very much for being so kind to listen to my little story. I'm going to, it will be time for us to extinguish the chalice. And I won't be there to have the goodies, but I'm so happy that you're all there today. And I will, Stephen, you can also extinguish the chalice. I'm going to close off my candle as well. And what I'm going to read is something that Art, a member of our, Will Branson, Cole Bjornson, I have a friend called Cole Branson, Cole Bjornson has written, and he calls it the Upper Delaware Unitarian Fellowship Benediction. And so he says, as you leave this place, take the spirit of the fellowship with you. Embrace your friends and welcome the strangers. Do your best to love your neighbor as well as yourself. Strive to be good stewards of the resources that have been loaned to you. Remember, the earth is a treasure and should be honored and respected. Be prepared to face reality as it presents itself to you. You will have victories and failures, so bring them to this fellowship when we meet again, and we will revel in the former and support you in the latter. Until we gather again, go in peace. Thanks, Stephen.
Welcome.
Okay, I guess I'm off the hook. I'm going canvassing. Bye, everybody. I'm sending you seeds, Georgette. You're getting them. Bye, everybody. Have a wonderful week. Oh, I won't see you for I won't see you for 2 weeks. Okay. See ya.
This is me.
Yes, yeah. I don't know if anybody wants them, but they're not so tender, the stalks, once they bloom, but the blossoms can be used in. Oh, okay.
I can do it.
You could use, right? Oh, yeah. Normally I can, but then there was something happened.
Nice to see you as well. Yeah. Long time. Yeah. All right, I have to run.
Yeah.
Oh, good, don't take.